All right, everybody, we're back for Chapter 2, Part 2, continuing on with the interpretation of these various graphs that are provided by the United Nations. Um, this one here we can see the title is The Global Harm Due to Opioid Disorders. And so you can see on the left here, the opioids account for 69% of deaths due to drug use disorders in 2019. So basically, this is telling us the percentage, how much of the problem of deaths due to overdosing on drugs, how much of that problem around the world is due to opioids. 69%. That's this section right here. Oh, by the way, something funny. In part one, I had a difficult time identifying this color. So I asked my kids about it. I asked my daughter, who knows colors better than I did, but we really couldn't decide on a color. And so my son had me go to a website. I didn't know this was available, where you could give him a sample of the color that you're trying to figure out what the name of the color is, and this website will analyze that color and tell you what it is. So it turns out that, at least according to that website, the official name of this color is violet red. So that's what I'm going to call it from now on, is violet-red, because that's supposedly precisely what it is. I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, so violet red part, 69%. It's the bulk of the problem. You can see that the white section, that's other kinds of drugs, it's, what would that be? 31% of is other kinds of drugs. So one single type of drug alone accounts for most deaths around the world due to drug overdose. We can see that opioids account around the world for 38% of treatment for drug use disorders in 2021. So you can see that it's a smaller percentage. It's still very significant, 38%, as we saw in the last segment, that really the biggest thing, that type of drug use disorder that lands you into drug treatment is opioids around the world. So this is the single biggest one, but it's single. If you add all the other kinds of drugs like marijuana and amphetamines and all the rest of those, cocaine, etc., that it ends up being the majority this time. What would that be? 62% is other drugs, 38% is opioids. So, and then an additional point I would make between these two is, what this is telling us is that opioids causes a big problem in that it lands people in drug treatment centers. It's big. It's not everything. It's not half, but it's big. But it is over half. It does dominate the deaths. So it's big in the treatments, dominates the deaths around the world. And to get specific here, they give us a number. Opioid use disorders cost an estimated 12.9 million years of healthy life lost due to disability and premature death in 2019. This is equivalent to 71% of years of healthy life lost due to drug use disorders. So again, what they're getting at here, the big story here, is that when it comes to a healthy life being lost, not being healthy anymore, or in the worst case scenario, dying, overdosing and dying, that opioids account for the biggest chunk of the loss in healthy lives being lived by people around the world when we're talking about the drug problem, the drug use disorders. It's another way of saying that opioids are the biggest problem here. Now, maybe I'll wait till there's actually a key term that I want you to know that they're describing here, but they're not naming it. Maybe it's the next. Let me see if the next slide, it's a couple slides from now, I'll have to define this term that they just kind of used, but they didn't define it. We'll get to that. Okay, so on this graph, it's the prevalence of people who inject drugs by sex, so males and females separated, and the 2021 or whatever latest data is available. And it's just for selected countries all around the world, and we can kind of compare ourselves, the United States of America, with the rest of the globe. And you can see that again, this violet red, no, it looks like it's a little bit darker color possibly here, but we'll stick with that. Violet red among women, and the white is for men. And so you can see what I would look for when I look at lots of different countries, or there's a lot of different things to compare. I usually, to summarize, to pull away the big story, which is what you're always trying to do with these graphs, is I look for really high cases or really low cases, because your extremes can help tell a story. So you can see that the bars that extend the furthest, where you can see along this x-axis, is the percent of people in a population who are injecting drugs. So this is be 0% here. This will be 1% of the population, 2% of the population, 3% of the population. So you can see that in Haiti, a poor country to our southeast of the United States, in the Caribbean area, that they have, both for men and for women, the highest numbers. For women, you can see that it's over 2%. For men, over 2.5% of people who live in that country are injecting drugs. So that's pretty substantial. You say, well, you might say, well, 2%, 2.5%, it doesn't really sound like that much. 2 out of 100, it doesn't sound like that much. But think about it. We're talking about, this is serious drug use. This is where you're injecting drugs. And if you add up that percentage, if it's for the whole country, you've got, many people with this problem. So Haiti sticks out here as number one, but look at the United States. Not that far behind, at least for men. Remember the white bar. Men are over 2%. Over 2% of American men are injecting drugs in 2021. That is pretty significant. And look at how there's a big gender difference, because for females here, it's down less than 1%. So there's a big gender gap. Males more than twice as likely to be injecting drugs compared to females in the United States. So those two countries, which are close together geographically, very high numbers compared to the other countries. You can see that Mexico, which is to our south, also is fairly high. And again, you can see a lot bigger gap with males, like over double that of females. So you're going to see that that's a big story here that comes up again and again, as we're seeing more of a male problem than a female problem. It looks like in all of these countries, the white lines, the man is longer than the darker line. It's looking to me more like almost like a purple now. So we can see that that's one story to walk away. Big gender difference, and some countries more of a gender difference than other ones. But then you can see some, if you look for the smallest one, there's hardly anything going on. Hong Kong doesn't have much, even though Hong Kong's a big, major metropolitan, heavily densely populated city. It doesn't have much of a problem. And you can see, if we look here, where else you can see. Now, I'm not sure with Slovenia if they don't have a problem, or they're just lacking data. Sri Lanka, Southern Asia is low. Tajikistan, we're out in in central, would be what? Central Asia. These are kind of fairly poor countries, but you don't really see a clear pattern here, because you see wealthy and poor countries on both sides of this problem. The United States has a big problem. It's wealthy. Haiti's poor. It's got a big problem. And then you see some poor countries that don't have much of a problem. Hong Kong's a wealthier city, don't have a problem. So it doesn't seem to be that, it doesn't jump out here clearly that wealth is tied into this. But anyway, so I'm not seeing a real pattern in terms of regions. I do think this might say Hong Kong might suggest a less of a problem in Eastern Asia. But still, if nothing else, I would take away, comparing these countries, that the United States has a problem. The United States, in this sample of countries, the United States coming in number 2. So we have a serious problem here with people injecting drugs, especially men. The amount of opioids under international control available for medical consumption by country income level group 2017 and 2022 or 21. So we're looking at two different years here, one more recent. So this what this is telling us is this is how much sort of like how much of these opioids, which are very powerful drugs, are available for medical consumption. That this is basically drugs, opioids that are available through the medical process, through prescription, the legal process to get legal access to these drugs. And you can see here, these bars here represent high income, wealthy countries over the two time periods, 2017, 2021. And then here's for low or middle income countries, so poorer countries. You can see that most of the opioids are available in wealthy countries. And you can see that much less available in poor countries. But it is shifting. What the arrows are telling us is that the availability is shifting up some in the past few years. In the poor countries, it's shifting up there and shifting down in the wealthy countries. So the availability is kind of shifting a little bit more towards the poor countries. It's still the bulk of it's still in the wealthy countries, but there is a little bit of a shift there that you can notice. And this is looking at it's a measure of availability per year. And here we're looking at sort of like where you're adjusting for how many people you have in those countries, right? This is not adjusting for how many people you have in those countries. So this is a per cap over here. This is a per capita. And so once you take into account the size of the populations in these wealthy or poor countries, you see it's even sharper. See, there's fewer people in these wealthy countries, and so because there's fewer people, then this measure is going to be higher because it's per million inhabitants. So it's adjusting for population size. But basically, what's the takeaway here? The takeaway here is whether you're looking at the total numbers or the rates that are adjusting for how many people are in those regions, it's basically the same story. Most of the availability of opioids is in wealthy countries, less availability in poor countries, but there is a little bit of a shift towards the poorer countries over the past, between 2017 and 2021. So you can see this little bit of the shift in these drugs to poor. These poor countries over time they tend to get wealthier, higher income. When you have a higher income, you tend to get more resources, including something like these medical opioids. Now, the proportion of women among drug users and in people in drug treatment 2021. So then again, this is an example. I think this could be kind of a confusing graph. What it's saying here is you got major different types of drugs, and it's telling you what percent of the people who in the first column here, the left side, it tells you what percent of the people using the drugs are female, and then to the right is the percent who are female who are in treatment. So that's how come they have two individuals here. One is if we're talking about users, the other one's talking about in treatment. And you'll see that all the way across here, regardless of what drugs we're talking about, it's the same thing we've seen before. More use by men. All of these are less than 50%, right? And so since they're less than 50%, that means that men are the majority of users of, and let's walk through these quickly. Amphetamines, women are less than 50%, they're 40%. Marijuana, they're 30%. Cocaine, 27%. Opioids, 25%. New psychoactive substances, so new drugs, 22%. Non-medical use of sedatives, tranquilizers, so you're misusing drugs that are prescription, close to 50%. That's almost you almost have 50-50, not quite. But you can see I just went over people who are using, but what about people who end up in getting treatment? you can see the numbers even smaller for the women. 27% of those getting treatment for amphetamines are women. So that means the 73% are men. The other part of that adds up to 100, right? So 23% of those who are getting treatment for marijuana are women. The rest, the majority, are men. 27% are women for cocaine. 28% for opioids. And then this one here is 47% past year use, non-medical. So here they're talking about using pharmaceutical opioids. It's still majority men, even though it's kind of close. But let's get back to the treatment issue. Minority, for only 28% of people getting treatment for opioids are women. 6%, only 6% for the new stuff. So it's mostly guys who are getting treated for the. It seems like the guys are more likely to be trying new drugs and to be getting hooked on those drugs and needing services, needing treatment for those, because men are 94% of those getting treated. Women only 6%. And finally, you've got, this is for the sedatives and tranquilizers. You see 38%. So still it's a majority of men. So the takeaways here, men are using the most, men are getting treatment the most, and men men are more disproportionate for treatment. So if you were to ask me, well, how come these numbers are so low for women for treatment, pretty much across the board, especially with the new stuff, but for any of these, why are the numbers so low for women? I don't know 100% for sure, but what the precise explanation is, but likely it is that people that men and women use drugs, not that different from each other. Males will use drugs a little more than females, but the males are significantly more likely to abuse the drugs, where it's just not the occasional or recreational use, but addictive use, dependent use, where you get hooked on it. And men are more likely to get to that point of dependency, of abuse. And so probably the main reason why you're seeing such small female numbers and large male numbers for treatment is that it's the guys who are using it a lot, getting addicted, and then needing treatment. Females, maybe might use it, but don't use it enough where they're getting hooked. And so that's probably your big story for why you see those big differences, male versus female. Okay, we'll continue on in part 3.